Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Create Habit-Forming Experiences. My name is Gabriel McIntosh. I'm Senior Manager of Digital Marketing at Episerver, and I will be your moderator today. This webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to you within the next couple of days. At the end of the webinar, the presenters will answer any questions from the webinar attendees. Please feel free to post these questions throughout the presentation in the chat box on your webinar toolbar. We encourage you to log on to Twitter and use hashtag EpiLive to add your own comments and questions. Many of you already know us, but if you are new to Episerver, I'd like to give you a brief summary. Episerver is a global provider of a unified platform for digital content, commerce, and marketing. Our company started more than 20 years ago, focusing on helping our customers provide great digital experiences. We continuously develop our platform, including new capabilities for machine learning and artificial intelligence. Episerver has over 9,000 customers running more than 30,000 websites. Our customers are in a number of sectors, including financial services, utilities, travel, manufacturing, and the public sector. If you want to learn more about Episerver and our solutions, please visit us at episerver.com. Presenting on today's topic is Nir Eyal. Nir writes, consults, and teaches about the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. He founded 2 tech companies, has taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and is the best-selling author of Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. Joey Moore, Director of Product Marketing at Episerver, will introduce you to Episerver's platform. Prior to Episerver, Joey spent the last decade working with enterprise-level digital commerce clients, helping drive results for some of the largest brands and retailers and guiding them to become leaders in the digital space. And finally, Rob Stoves, Senior Solution Architect at Episerver, who has spent the last 10 years working with various enterprise content management systems and focuses on translating customers' business requirements to technical solutions to help them achieve their goals. Rob will show you how Episerver's solutions for content management and marketing can make some of Nir's ideas a reality in a live demo. And with that, I'm handing it over to Joey.
Great, thanks a lot for that, Gabe. So Nir's going to take us through the hook model, some of the principles for creating these highly engaging products and experiences. I'm also going to be talking about why this is so important, and then Rob's going to take us through the demo, and at the time we're going to wrap up at the end with some questions as well. So first of all, let's have a bit of an idea about why this is so important. Well, 89% of organizations think that they're going to have to compete mainly on customer experience over the coming years. And this is data from Gartner. And this is principally because we all have these massively heightened customer expectations, which indeed we all have. And that's because the bar is kind of set with the last great experience that we have online. And we all do it, so whether that's the kind of banking app we do, whether that's kind of a social network or the search engines that we choose to use, they're all fantastic experiences. So when they're interacting with your own digital experiences, then that's the bar that customers are looking towards. So to be able to fight this, we're introducing individualized content from Episerver, and this is really the next generation of content management and digital marketing technology. It's a solution for individualized content that combines artificial intelligence, user journey optimization, understanding all the contextual data that goes into those experiences, so that you're not just personalizing the individual experience of the user, but you're able to create these rich content experiences across all your digital assets as well. And this is something you couldn't really do with existing CMSs without sort of bolting together sort of different products from different providers and having to maintain and having to integrate all those different solutions with all the complexity that entails and separate monthly invoices from all those different providers. And this actually is part of a different set of solutions from Episerver that actually goes to the heart of addressing this customer journey challenge. So if we look at this chart here, you can see on the left axis we have the customer experience delivery, and that's the ability for organizations to be able to deliver these rich customer experiences. And on the bottom axis, you can see the things that organizations are actually able to have in terms of how mature they are digitally. And there's lots of aspirations in companies to start using things like machine learning, different customer data platforms. But what we've actually done with individualized content is actually pull a lot of these things much earlier in the journey, so that right into the CMS itself. So you can actually start to use things like event triggers, you start to use things like the customer journey analytics, and start to really drill into all that data and marketing automation as well, and use it within. And as I said, that goes towards a whole selection of solutions from Episerver, so intelligent campaigns as well, experience-driven commerce for those of you that are selling online, and all together as part of the digital experience platform. And over the coming while, we're going to be other webinars to really look and address all these different solutions from us. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass back over to Nir, and he's going to take us through his talk. Nir, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. It is a real pleasure being here today. I'm so happy that we have so many folks joining us today, and I'm excited to share with you my work over the past few years on how to build habit-forming products. Let me go ahead and share this presentation, just one moment. All right, so let me go ahead and introduce you to some of my work. You know, what we've all seen over the past several years is that these devices that we use, these digital devices that we use, have had a profound impact on changing our behavior. And so my research over the past several years is to understand how these world-changing companies have done it. You know, if you want to get really good at something, you want to ask the best in the business. If you wanted to be, let's say, a competitive swimmer, you might want to call Michael Phelps. If you wanted to be an amazing investor, maybe you want to learn from Warren Buffett. And if you want to build customer engagement and retention, you want to look at the best in the business. So what we're going to do today is to look at some of the most habit-forming, high engagement products, you know, the usual suspects of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp in the consumer space. Same rules go for the enterprise space for companies like Slack and GitHub and Salesforce. All of them have a very specific pattern that is designed into the customer experience. And that's what we're going to learn today, is how do these companies design their products? What techniques do they use to make the kind of products and services that people want to come back to on their own? Now, I spent several years writing this book, Hooked, and it was the basis of a class that I taught at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford and the design school there. I want to give you one disclaimer here, is that I only have about 20 minutes. There's a lot more in the book that we're not going to have time to cover. So I'm going to give you kind of just highlights of this model that we find built into habit-forming experience. There's certainly enough to be useful here, but just want to give you a warning that this is not going to be an exhaustive look at this topic. And we will have some time for a Q&A as well if there's some things you'd like to go deeper on. So what we find at the core of these products is that they all build a habit. And just so that we're all on the same page, what do I mean by this word habit? A habit is simply an impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought. It's about half of what you do, according to researchers, have told us that about half of what you do every day is done through little or no conscious thought. Now, the promise of building a habit-forming product is that you can build a kind of customer experience that people enjoy using, that they come back to on their own without requiring expensive marketing and spammy advertising. You can get people to use the product because they want to, not because they have to, right? We're not using Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these products because they're have tos, because we're always externally triggered. We use these products out of habit. So we want to take these lessons from these companies and integrate them so that we can help our customers, our users, live happier, healthier, more productive, more connected lives. So I really believe that we are on the precipice of this age where we can use these habits for good. And there are all sorts of companies in every industry you can imagine that are using these same psychological tenets from consumer psychology to build these kind of products that can help people do the things they want to do, but for lack of good product design, don't do. So that's really what we're going to be looking at. How can we make the kind of products and services that people want to keep coming back to on their own? To do that, we've got to build a hook. What we find is endemic to all these products we just talked about is that every single one of them at the core of the user experience has what I call a hooked model. A hook model has 4 basic steps. Every hook has a trigger, an action, a reward, and finally an investment. And so we're going to walk through relatively quickly these 4 basic steps to give you kind of an understanding so that you can start seeing these patterns in the products and services that you use, and more importantly, that you can see where your product or service may be deficient in one or more of these 4 critical areas. So let's dive right in. The first step of creating a hook is the trigger phase. Now, triggers come in 2 types. The first type of trigger you'll be very familiar with. It's called an external trigger. External triggers are things that tell us what to do next with some piece of information. Click here, buy now, play this. All of these are things in our outside environment, in our outside world, that tell us what to do next. Now, we as product designers and marketers and engineers, we know all about these external triggers. This is our craft, this is our trade, this is what we do for a living. But what product designers don't think about enough, and what turns out to be absolutely critical when it comes down to forming these long-term habits, is creating an association with what's called an internal trigger. An internal trigger is something that tells the user what to do next, but the information for what to do is stored as a memory or an association inside the user's head. So what we do when we're in a particular place, a certain situation, around certain people, partaking in certain routines, and most frequently when we experience certain emotions, prompts us to action, tells us what to do next. Now, the most frequent internal triggers are these emotions, but not just any emotion, they are specifically negative emotions. So for every habit, in fact, for every product we use, we only use that product for one reason only. One reason only for any product we use. And that reason is to modulate our mood, to make us feel something different. And so if we're building a habit-forming product, we've got to understand what is that internal trigger, and does it occur with sufficient frequency? Frequency is very important. We can talk about that in the Q&A. Frequency is a very important attribute of creating a habit, but we always want to attach to one of these internal triggers. When people are feeling lonely or indecisive or bored or fatigued, we've got to attach our product's use to that internal trigger, because that's where we solve a pain point. We don't want to create these internal triggers, of course. They already exist. It's our job as product designers to figure out where these occur in the user's life and provide the salve, provide the solution for that discomfort. There was a great study a few years ago that found that actually people who suffer from depression check email more, right? This is a great study demonstrating how internal triggers drive our behavior, that people suffering from clinical depression actually check email more. And the idea was that the researchers believe that people who experience these negative valence states, the ones who experience this painful emotion, are more likely to check their devices. They check more frequently. But if we're honest with ourselves, we all do this, right? If I asked you what website or app do people check when they're feeling lonely, when they're seeking connection? We check Facebook. What about when we're feeling unsure, before we scan our brains to see if we even know the answer to something? We Google it. And what do we do when we're feeling bored? You know, between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you have that big project you don't want to work on right now. Well, you go to YouTube, you check stock prices, you see what's happening in the news, you look at Reddit. There's lots of these solutions to cater to this internal trigger of boredom. So the real lesson here is, if we're going to improve our customers' lives, if we're going to figure out ways to create healthy habits and routines with our customers and our products, we've got to figure out what is that internal trigger. Very, very important, critical step for forming these long-term customer habits. Let's move on to the second step of the hook, the action phase. The action phase is defined as the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. The very simplest thing that we can do to give the customer or the user relief from that discomfort. So something as simple as a scroll on Pinterest, or a quick search on Google, or what could be simpler and easier than pushing the play button on YouTube. These incredibly simple behaviors done in anticipation of an immediate reward. In fact, there's a formula that helps us predict the likelihood of these singular behaviors. It's a very powerful formula. If you haven't seen it before, it comes from a researcher at Stanford by the name of B.J. Fogg, a friend of mine, who tells us that for any human behavior, we always need 3 things. We need sufficient motivation, sufficient ability, and the trigger must be present. Now, let me talk about this for a little bit. What fog tells us is that we can actually plot out these three factors on this conceptual graph, which if you are having trouble getting people to do the thing you designed your product to do, if they're not clicking, if they're not scrolling, if they're not doing any behavior with your product, there is only one of three reasons why. Either they lack motivation on the y-axis there, they lack ability. Let me explain ability. Ability is how easy or difficult something is to do. So if something is very easy to do, it's on the far right of that x-axis. If something is hard to do, if it's difficult to do, it's on the far left. And only when the user has sufficient motivation and sufficient ability do they cross that red threshold. And when a trigger is present, the behavior will occur. Every single time, online, offline, your behavior, your spouse's behavior, your customer or user's behavior always requires these three basic elements. There's only one of these three reasons why people aren't doing the intended behavior. So what we have to do to encourage that singular behavior is to either boost motivation, make the product easier to use, and always make sure that there's a clear trigger. I can't tell you how many times in my consulting practice I work with a company that has some amazing technological solution that they built, and they show me all the whiz-bang tech that they've implemented. And I ask them a question such as, well, where's the trigger? What do you want the user to do in this instance? And it's not clear. You know, so many times that happens to us. Or the second most common is that it's just too hard. You know, a lot of times products that are designed with an engineering mindset tend to stuff all the things the product can do in the user's face, when what it does is it increase cognitive load. It makes it more difficult for the user to figure out what exactly it is you want them to do. So for every interaction, we always have to make sure that the user has sufficient motivation, sufficient ability, and that a clear trigger is present every single time. For the sake of time here, let's move on to the third step of the hook, the reward phase. A fascinating part of human behavior starts with how we respond to rewards. And when we talk about rewards, we have to start in the brain. And in particular, an area of the brain that is called the nucleus accumbens. The nucleus accumbens was first studied by two Canadian researchers by the name of Olds and Milner back in the 1940s. And Olds and Milner did some very fascinating experiments. They took electrodes and they implanted them in the brain of lab animals. And they allowed these lab animals to stimulate this part of the brain every time they clicked on a little lever. And what they found was that these lab animals wanted nothing but stimulating their nucleus accumbens hundreds of times, again and again and again. And in fact, in later experiments done on people, when people were given a little button to press on that sent an electrical jolt to their nucleus accumbens, they did it hundreds of times. They had to have the machines forcibly removed from them to get them to stop activating this part of the brain. Well, the good news is we do not have to wire up our users, because we can actually stimulate the very same part of the brain every day. In fact, your nucleus accumbens is activated all the time. Anytime you see luxury goods, the certain junk food, sex, chemicals, and of course, right there in the center, our cell phones, right? Our technologies. All of these things activate our nucleus accumbens anytime we want something. Now, for decades, the psychology community believed that the purpose of the nucleus accumbens was to stimulate pleasure, right? Why else would lab animals and people so incessantly activate the nucleus accumbens if it wasn't because it felt good, right? Not exactly. It turns out what we now know that Olds and Milner and the psychologists in the 1940s never did was that the nucleus accumbens does not become active. The purpose of the nucleus accumbens is not to stimulate pleasure per se, but in fact stimulates something else. It stimulates anticipation of the reward. So in this fMRI study, you can see that the nucleus accumbens becomes most active right before the reward is to be had. But when we actually get the thing we want, the thing that's going to make us happy and finally make us feel good, that's when the nucleus accumbens becomes less active. So the way the brain gets us to act is not with pleasure per se, but the anticipation of that pleasure. And there is a way to supercharge this wanting, this craving reflex. I can teach you a way to literally manufacture desire. Is anybody curious about how to manufacture desire? You know, by taking that long pause and asking you a question, I'm proving my point. Because some of you perked up. Some of you stopped and asked yourself, wait a minute, why did this person change his content, his cadence? What's he going to say next? What's the answer to the question? And that's exactly the point. That the unknown is fascinating. That variability, a bit of mystery, causes us to engage, it causes us to focus, and it is highly habit forming. This, of course, comes from the classic work of B.F. Skinner, the father of operant conditioning. He took these pigeons, he put them in a little box, and he gave these pigeons a disc to peck at. And every time they pecked at the disc, they would receive a little reward, a little food pellet. And very quickly, Skinner could train his pigeons to peck at the disc whenever they were hungry. Hunger was the internal trigger. But then Skinner started running out of these food pellets. And what he started to do was to give the food pellets every once in a while. So sometimes the pigeon would peck at the disc and they wouldn't get a reward. The next time they would peck at the disc, they would receive a reward. And what Skinner observed was that when he gave the food pellets on a variable schedule of reinforcement, the rate of response increased. The pigeons pecked more frequently when the reward was given on an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. Why does this happen? Because variability spikes activity in the nucleus accumbens, creating this desirous response, creating this craving reflex. And so in all sorts of products, offline and online, you will find variable rewards, specifically these three types of variable reward that I call rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, and rewards of the self. Let me introduce these to you briefly. Rewards of the tribe are all about the search for social rewards, things that feel good, that have this element of mystery, this bit of variability, and come from other people. So the search for empathetic joy, feeling good from partnerships, cooperation, competition, all examples of variable rewards of the tribe. We see this, of course, online in spades when you think about social media, right? Every time you open up the Facebook app, there's uncertainty around what you might find that has to do with your friends. What did they post? What are the comments going to say? How many likes does something get? High degree of social variability. The next type of variable reward is the search for resources, what I call rewards of the hunt. These stem from our primal search for food, possessions, material supplies. And of course, in modern society, we buy these things with money. And so many people, when they think about variable rewards, they think about slot machines, right? What keeps a Las Vegas slot machine in business is the fact that there's uncertainty, right? There's this mystery around what you might win when you play one of these games of chance. We see something very similar when it comes to information rewards. Consider for a minute the feed, right? Why is it that so many products today have a feed embedded in the product's use? What is it about the feed? Well, take an example like LinkedIn, for example, bought by Microsoft last year for, I think, around $30 billion. Well, what is it about LinkedIn's feed? And we see the same exact feed when it comes to Slack, when it comes to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything has a feed. Well, when you look at that feed, maybe the first story is not that interesting, maybe the second story is not that interesting, but the third story might be interesting. And what do you have to do to get more interesting content? Well, you just have to scroll. And that scrolling and scrolling uses the exact same psychology as pulling on a slot machine. Both variable rewards of the hunt, searching and searching for that next variable reward. And finally, the last type of variable reward is the rewards of the self. This is all about the search for mastery, consistency, competency, and control. Best example online is gameplay, right? When people play Angry Birds or Candy Crush or any number of other online games, they're not necessarily winning anything in terms of material possessions. They're not necessarily even playing with other people, but there's something fun about getting to the next level, the next accomplishment, the next achievement. And I know everybody on this webinar is a very serious business person. None of you actually play these games, I know. But if you're anything like me, you play this game every day. Does this game look familiar? Your email inbox, right? That compulsion to check those unread messages, or to finish the to-dos on your to-do list, or to clear that one app icon off your screen so that you can clear it away when you see that notification. Those are all rewards of the self, the search for mastery, consistency, competency, and control. Now, the point of variable rewards is to scratch the user's itch, to give them what they came for, and yet leave them wanting more. This bit of mystery, this bit of uncertainty around what they might find the next time they engage with your product or service. Finally, the last step of the hook, the investment phase, is probably the most overlooked of the four. And this is where I think Episerver's products really shine, is helping to fulfill this investment phase of the hook. The investment phase is where the user puts something into the product for a future benefit, some kind of future reward. It's not about immediate gratification. That's what the action phase is for. The point of the investment phase is to increase the likelihood of the next pass through the hook. And investments do this in two ways. The first way that investments increase the likelihood of the next pass through the hook is by loading the next trigger, So for example, when I send someone a message on WhatsApp, but you can substitute any messaging service, Slack, or just a text message, any messaging service, when you send someone a message, you're not necessarily winning anything, right? You don't get any kind of immediate reward. There's no points, there's no badges, nothing really happens when you send someone that message. But what you're doing when you invest in the platform by sending someone that message is that you are loading the next trigger because you are likely to receive a reply. And that reply comes coupled with, see that red notification icon? That is an example of an external trigger. That's what we talked about in the very first step of the hook, that loads the next pass through the hook cycle. Okay, so these investments, the first way that investments increase the likelihood of the next pass is by loading the next trigger, something that the user does, not something that, some spammy messaging or advertising, something that I did instead to bring myself back. The second way that investment increases the likelihood of the next pass through the hook is by storing value. Storing value is a very, very big deal. Storing value is why I love working in technology as opposed to physical goods, because everything in the physical world depreciates with wear and tear, right? My shirt, my computer, everything in the physical world loses value with wear and tear, right? It depreciates. But consider this for a moment, that habit-forming products do the opposite. Habit-forming products should appreciate with use. They get better and better and better and more valuable the more we interact with them. And they do this because of this principle of stored value. Let me give you some examples. The more content I upload to a habit-forming product, like for example, Google Drive, the more content I upload, the more it becomes my one and only cloud storage solution. The more data I might give a company. So on Mint.com, a personal finance software, or you can substitute any number of services like Pinterest or Facebook, the more data you give these companies about your usage patterns, the more they can co-create the product experience with the user. They can literally customize what you see and how you experience the product in real time based on the data that you have invested in that service. And that data can be invested passively or actively, right? So every time you click a like button or comment or interact with a product, you're giving the company more data to improve the product just for you the more you use it. Followers, the more followers someone has, the better the product becomes a way to reach their audience. So for example, on Twitter, if Twitter tomorrow said, hey, we're gonna shut down Twitter unless you pay for it, it's no longer free. Who's more likely to continue to use Twitter? Is it going to be someone with 10 followers or someone with 10,000 followers? Of course, it's going to be the person with 10,000 followers because they have invested so much in that product in the form of their follower count. And finally, reputation. Reputation is a form of investment that users can literally take to the bank, because my investment in products like Upwork or eBay or Airbnb, my reputation dictates what I can charge for my goods and services. And how likely am I to leave one of these platforms even if something better comes along? Not very likely, right? Because I've saved all this reputation. I have all this reputation invested in that product, which allows me to sell it for more money. Now, this brings us to a very important and cold, hard truth that I know many of you won't like to hear this, but the fact is that the best product doesn't always win. There is no 11th commandment that says the best product wins. In fact, it's not the best product that necessarily wins. It's the product that can capture the monopoly of the mind, the first to mind solution that people turn to out of habit. And it's through successive cycles through these hooks, trigger action, reward, investment, that users' preferences change, that our tastes are formed, and that these habits take hold. So just to recap these 5 fundamental questions that you've got to be able to answer if you're building the kind of product that requires a habit, that requires that users use the product unprompted. Number 1, you've got to be able to answer what is the internal trigger that the product is addressing. Number 2, what's the external trigger that brings the product, the user to take the key action. Step number 3 here, what's the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward? Is the reward fulfilling and yet leaves the user wanting more? And then finally, what's the bit of work the user does to increase the likelihood of the next pass through the hook? Now, before we take questions, there's just one more thing I'd like to discuss, which is the morality of manipulation. You know, this has been a topic that's been in the news quite a bit lately, and I think it's very important that we consider for just a second the moral implications of designing user behavior. Because any time that we are changing people's behavior to meet our commercial interests in mind, even though that would clearly benefit the user as well, we have to be cautious. It is a form of manipulation. Because the products that we are building with this psychology in mind, this is the kind of technology that people take to bed with them every night. It's the first thing we turn to in the morning before we even say hello to our loved ones. So we have to be very careful about our responsibility to change people's behavior for good. You know, the world is full of problems to fix. And I think that we can use habit-forming technology not just for frivolity, but actually to help people build healthy habits in their day-to-day lives. My audience is not Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. They already know these techniques. What I want to do is to teach everyone else who is building software to improve people's lives to use it for good. And let me give you just one quick example. This is a company I invested in a few years ago. They called me up. I do these office hours every week on my website. If you'd like to book some time with me, you're more than welcome. I book these in 15-minute increments. At the bottom of my website, you'll see a little button. This company called me a few years ago, a guy by the name of Glenn Moriarty, who's a psychotherapist in Virginia Beach. He called me and he said, look, I know that far too many people don't get the kind of therapy that they need, okay? So here's my hook. I read your book, and here's the hook I'm going to implement for my app. This app is called 7 Cups, and here's how it works. The internal trigger is feeling lonely, right? It's needing someone else to talk to, whether it's he services veterans with PTSD, parents who have a child with a disability, or just any of us that need someone to talk to when we're feeling down. The action is to simply open the app, and you're instantly connected to another person who's ready to listen. The variable reward is rewards of the tribe, right? That other person on the other end of the line that you're making a connection with. And finally, the investment is the more you use the product, you're actually taught how to be a trained listener yourself. And here's the dramatic part, that people who use this app and learn how to help others through this app get better, dramatically better. In fact, a third-party study found that people who use this app find it to be as effective as traditional psychotherapy. This one app conducts over 800,000 sessions every week. Unbelievable. Talk about the amazing power of using habits for good. And with that, I encourage you to use habits to improve people's lives, to change their lives for good, and build the change that you wish to see in the world. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you very much. Oh, one more thing before we take questions. I want to leave this URL up because many times people ask for the slides, and I know we're going to have a recording of this entire presentation, but if you'd like the slides just to share them with your team, you're more than welcome. If you go to this quick survey, opinion2.us is the URL. I would love to know what you thought of the presentation. I constantly consider everyone's feedback. And so as soon as you do that little survey, it's only, I think, 5 questions, and you click submit, you'll be given a link to my SlideShare page where you can see this presentation. It's called Hook Model, is the presentation you just saw. And there's also a presentation there that's very similar to this one, but only for enterprise applications. So if you're building the kind of product that caters to enterprise clients, there's a presentation there called Hooked in the Enterprise, which is pretty much the same presentation, but all enterprise examples, if that's more relevant to your industry. And with that, happy to open up to questions.
Cool, thank you, Nir. What we'll do is questions at the end after we've done a demo. No, that's cool, because then it'll give people a chance to sort of interrogate us both. But I thought that was such an interesting presentation. As you know, I love the book, and I'd recommend anyone to buy a copy as well. It's really, really good. Well, one of the things that I really took away from the book as well, that at the end of every chapter, where there's a kind of a do this now, and it's really about taking action on things that we've learned and about how to implement those ideas and how to do some of the things and sort of work from those learnings. And that's one of the things that we really focus on at Episerver is we love what we do, and we want to help marketers to instantly realize their brilliant ideas. It's what we're all about. So just before we dive into the demo, we'll Rob's going to run first. We'll just give you an idea about what the sense is. So it's going to be a very short overview of some of the most common tasks that marketers and editors are doing on the platform today. We're going to show you how to create some new content, how we can recognize individual users from the different channels they're coming through, perhaps from the different triggers they're acting on, tailoring specific content around specific campaigns to make it that very actionable content, but they're very rewarding for those users, and then explore some of the insight gathered as well. So where we've got some of that stored value, where we've got some of that investment that those customers made in terms of some of the data that they've been pushing through the platform to improve those experiences, we can actually take a look at that as well. So without further ado, Rob, do you want to take us through the demo?
That's great, thanks, Joe. So I'm just going to shut off my camera to give you full access to this screen to view the demo. I'm going to be looking down on my laptop as well for most of the demo as well. So let me just go ahead and switch screens, and you should be able to maximize your screen now to be able to see what looks like Nir's website. It's not actually Nir's website to start off with. Just want to make that clarification. So we've just taken some Nir's content, some of the articles that he has on his website, and it gives us an area and some content to play around with and demonstrate how Episerver platform can be used to deliver any customer experience. The first thing we're going to do to start off with is a really simple example, and it's to create a product page to launch, to launch a new product and to allow people to find out more about our hooked product, to sign up and download it. So the first thing I do is I place the site in edit mode. And placing it in this mode loads up all the necessary tools that we need to do our job as content marketers. Tools to create content and to promote it are all readily accessible from toolbars presented around our content, and we can configure them for our specific role. Just to point out a few key aspects to the user interface to people that aren't familiar or may not have seen Episerver before. As I said before, the content is focused around the site you're working on. So I have a top menu here, and with the accessible features to access various content editing features and administration features. I've got access into enterprise level search tool to be able to manage and configure what terms people are searching for on our site and how to optimize that and make sure they're finding the right content. And other tools like Insight to gather sort of data analytics about users' behaviour, and a fully fledged campaign tool to be able to manage marketing campaigns. Now on the left hand side we have various toolbars, and the right hand side here as well, to be able to manage the tools we need to do our job as content marketers. So on the right hand side here I have a full media library, asset manager to be able to manage the assets, images, PDFs, any other documents like videos and things that I'm going to be sharing on my website, and access to things like a forms library, which can all be created within the system. So let's just go ahead and add a page to promote Nir's book. So I'm going to go into a particular area here and create a new page from here. I've got some content that I'm going to be switching to save you watching me type all this content in, and I'm going to copy and paste this as we go. So I'm going to create a new article about this hooked book. And you can see here that adding the page gives us an in-context view where we can add and edit content while still being able to see what our customers will see when the page is published. So the title is pulled through that I've already entered, and I can enter some remaining content like the teaser text, for example, and some main copy on the page. of course, we get an appropriate toolbar to be able to format that content appropriately. We can do some great things like upload images into the system. So as I said before, we have an asset manager exposed on the right-hand side here. And I have an image that I've got saved on my desktop. I can just simply drag and drop that into the system. So perhaps I've got a set of books here. I can drag and drop that in. And as I've already got it in the system, I can choose to replace the file or skip the file. So I'm just going to replace that to upload a new version of that document. And then I can just, when it's in the Asset Manager, I can just drag and drop that onto the page and then format appropriately. So we might also want a form on our page to be able to allow people to sign up to download this great new product. So I can go to my forms library, and I've got one that I've already designed for another page. And again, I can format that and say I want to sit that beside the image. Behind the scenes, I might want to set things like SEO data and any metadata that I want published out on the page. So I've always got this view that gives us access to all the properties that may not be published out or may be used for other channels perhaps. I also want to drag in my image to use as a teaser image that we'll use later. So we may also want to check the page looks good on a range of different devices. So we have a device preview built in. We can go up and see what this looks like on a mobile view. And we can even edit in this view as well. So we can click and make the same edits that we did on our main desktop view. In fact, as the shift to mobile occurs and more traffic, more and more of our customer journeys occur on mobile devices, some of our customers work primarily in this view with a mobile first approach. We obviously have a full content approval process. So assuming this content has gone through approval and assuming we have permission to publish, we can hit that publish button in the top right, and the content is immediately live on Episerver's cloud-based service. The service will scale no matter how popular your content is. So after we've published the page, we can use Episerver's integrated campaign tool to send out appropriate campaign emails. But we can also send out additional external triggers in this terminology through social media. So we can do this right from the page by clicking on this share button. And this will go out to appropriate channels. So we have 3 channels set up here. I'm just going to send a tweet out. I perhaps want to select an appropriate image. So I can select one from Nir's content here. And I can send that either on a schedule or immediately. Now you can see here, I did a test earlier, but you can see here that the one I've just sent, I can look at the responses there. So if I just jump across to Twitter, this test account, you can see here it's automatically published out the text that I specified with the image, and it's also created a shortened link to allow people to link back to the site. Obviously, when I click that back into the content, you can see that this dashboard updates live, and it will show me clicks and retweets, and in the case of other platforms, how many shares it's got and things like that. So as well as sending out these external triggers, we need to personalize our site to align with the campaign. So back on the home page, we're going to add a call to action and a banner to make sure that content is all in sync with our user's journey. So adding a call to action is easy. We've already added the content when we created the page, so we can just drag that page onto the home page. And we can reformat in a suitable layout. Right now, we're going to publish the page with it at the top. But perhaps we want to play around with layout and see how effective that placement is, or the design is. So another thing we can do that's integrated into the platform is some A/B testing tools to allow us to play around with that. So at the moment, this page is published in this format. if I perhaps change the way this is displayed, and I move it down to another area of the page, in fact the area where it is on the live site, then I can, instead of publishing from the same UI element here, I can just do an A/B test straight away. And this will show us each version of the content side by side and allow us to firstly define a goal. So here we're driving people to that download page. And we can specify the percentage of our audience that see that test, and also define a test duration. So as soon as the test is complete, we can have the test go live automatically after that date. So starting the test now, and it works like a lot of other A/B test tools on the market. It will obviously present different variations to different people, and select a winner on the most effective based on our goals. So the other thing we're going to do is add a banner to the homepage to make sure that the content is aligned when users come in through another channel, perhaps the tweet, or perhaps it's an email that we sent out via our campaign tool. So I'm just going to wind back this test to get the pages in an editable format. And I'm going to drag in a banner to sit across the top of the page. Now, one thing I want to do is make sure that this perhaps isn't relevant for all users, but perhaps only interesting to people that have come in through our campaign. So I can, right from the context menu in the top right here, I can personalize this content. And that works for any page or site, or any item of content within the site. And I can personalize that towards a particular group of visitors. Now I've predefined a group to say they've shown interest in our hooked book, whether that be viewed the page or coming through those separate channels that I've just defined. So now for me that content disappears, and when I publish that page, I can go and simulate someone coming in from another channel. So perhaps that could be an email. So here's an email that would have been sent out from our campaign tool. We have a banner that drives people into the site. And when I click on that, you can see there that the new banner is displayed. So to reward customers and keep them coming back, we need to make sure we further individualize their experiences. I'm sure all of you have a load of great content on your sites, and we want to make sure that we connect the right content to the right people at the right time. So we have an area on this site for best articles, which is listing out in the first instance all a summary of some articles from Nir's site. So if I launch a new session, a new anonymous session, and go to this demo site, you can see here that if I just jump into that best articles area without defining my preferences at all, then I get shown all the articles. But if I look at perhaps a hooked book and go back to best articles, you can see there that it's starting to learn who I am and apply a subset of the articles. Again, if I change preference, the content will change to reflect that. So it's quite an easy concept to understand at this scale. Each article has an assigned category related to a book and filters based on the content viewed. However, if we scale up and have hundreds or even thousands of different types of content, how do we offer the same experience? We can't have hundreds of customer segments and manual rules to display what content to what visitor. This is where our AI and underlying profile store comes in. So this view into the profile store shows where each visitor journey is stored. Here you can filter down to to view and create further customer segments. So let's apply a filter for anonymous users in the past 24 hours in the UK. And that should show us some of the most recent anonymous journeys on our site. Now, of course, when someone makes themselves known by either logging into our service or filling out a form, perhaps with a supplying identifier, then these unknown journeys will link together. So perhaps certainly across channels. So if someone's anonymous through mobile and anonymous through desktop, then as soon as we find out who they are, that full history gets merged into one record. So let's take a look at our most recent journey here. So we know they've viewed a subset of pages. So they start off on the home page, and we can see the full history of where they've been on the site. But also we can show the content fragments that were served to them at the same time. So we can see here how we started to learn more about that user, and we started off showing all articles, and then started to tailor the content presented to them as it went through. So this rich data layer can capture all user behavior from multiple channels, and our AI layer is used to match the right content to the right person at the right time. So this stored value spans across all channels. So as well as personalizing content displayed on our websites, we can tailor content in emails, native apps, and even vary search results based on what we know about an individual's user's behavior. So each channel will have a corresponding tool to simply allocate an area of the homepage or landing page or email to show relevant content aligned to in-session intent. So I know there are a lot of customers attending this webinar. So for those of you already using Episerver today, and you're interested in how you can make use of this rich data layer to automatically show appropriate content, you can get in contact with your account manager to arrange a follow-up meeting. And for those of you that are new to Episerver, want to find out more, or maybe evaluating a new platform, you can request a more personalized session through episerver.com. So I hope that gave you an insight into the ease of how we can individualize our customers' experiences. So thanks for your time, and now back to Joey.
Cool, thank you so much for that, Rob. That's really great. So just a couple of, I'm very conscious of time, so just a couple of things that to talk through. One of the things, if people do want to find out more, but what I'd like to do is just draw some of the parallels to take us back to some of the things that Nir took us through, and really focus on that cycle again. So Rob showed us how it's so easy to create those email and social triggers based on any content or any interaction. How it's very easy to create those really engaging experiences, but also to optimize them with an A/B test. So to always be optimizing your content as well. In terms of reward, create those kind of variable rewards based on that data and the interaction that the users have on the site at any one time. And in terms of the investment as well, the more data or the more interaction the users have with your site or any digital asset, the more they're investing in that data as well. You're actually able to build and create those better experiences, and then, as you say, circle that all back into the trigger as well. And a lot of that really is powered by the underlying data structure that we have within the platform, that really focuses on using machines to do a lot of the work for you. So we saw how easy that was there to set up that campaign in I think literally 10 or 15 minutes, and really to create this really rich experience for a customer where they feel that the whole experience was personalized to them, and we weren't having to run off to IT to get them to do various things. It's something that we could create as marketers on the site very simply. And that really allows the marketer to focus on the creativity and the strategy, and letting the machine do what machines do best, and that's things like content sequencing and managing those triggers and resorting search results. if you do want to find out more about Episerver, then we'd love you to join one of our conferences this year. If you're an existing customer, it's a great opportunity now to book some sessions with an Episerver expert. And if you're evaluating a new digital experience platform, Ascend is a great place to meet existing customers and attend some of those demos and labs around best practice, etc. So hopefully we've got a few minutes for questions, and I've seen the sort of the questions come up in the chat window quite a lot. So Gabe, do we are there some questions for Nir and the rest of the team?
Yes, Joe, we had lots of questions come in. However, we're short on time. We have time for one. This one is for Nir. What is the most exciting trend you see on the horizon when it comes to applying habit-forming technology?
Yeah, so this is a terrific question. And by the way, I have to thank you for using my site as the case study. It's fascinating seeing exactly the answer to this question of what's the most exciting things happening when it comes to creating habit-forming products these days. It's that you've democratized the ability to do the kind of things that only the tech behemoths could do, right? Personalizing a website based on what you have done in the past. That's the prototypical example of the investment phase, where based on the data of how you've used the site, we can decipher what kind of information you'd like to see in the future. And the democratization of those tools, so that it's not just the people who have to build this technology from scratch, I think is extremely exciting. There's a good anecdote that kind of illustrates the importance of the investment phase. Imagine you went out with a friend for lunch and you sit down and you have a beautiful meal together and you tell them all the struggles that you're going through in your job and your home life and your kids, etc. You kind of disclose all this information about yourself and they disclose about you and it's about themselves. And it's a great conversation. That's what it means to be in a relationship, is that you can share this kind of stuff. But imagine what would happen if the next time you had lunch together, they forget every single thing you told them. Right? How terrible would that feel as a friend? Well, we do that to our customers all the time, right? We don't use this information that they want us to use to improve the product experience. So it's a real service that I think companies like Episerver are doing for the community, that we can that they help us use these data points to improve the product and cater it to our users and customers' needs.
Fantastic response. That's all we have time for today. Remember, we did record this webinar, and you will receive the recording in a couple of days. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Joey, Rob, and Nir. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.